Well. Welcome back to the swamp, my friends. It looks like we're heading off into the woods once again to go find spooks of all sorts and sizes. Today, joining me is my good friend Being Scared. You may know him from some rain videos here or there. If you enjoy his voice on story number 2, be sure to check out his channel and subscribe. You can find the link to do so at the top of the description down below. If you have a story you would like to share, be sure to submit it at swampdweller.net or the email you can find in the description down below. I would love to share your story with everyone here in the swamp. And stories like yours will help keep this channel going. Now, without further ado, let's get into these creepy camping stories that'll freak you out tonight. For some background information, I am a girl from Kansas, and every summer since I was 12 I've gone backpacking in Colorado. I love to hike, and getting into the mountains is my favorite part of every year. Along with the beauty, however, every year I have had a moment or two that makes me question coming back out into the wilderness at all. The summer I turned 15, however, has been the worst of them all. My day started much the same, with my friends and I waking up late and putting on our packs on to hike. This was going to be a fairly difficult day, as we were going up and over Georgia Pass on the Colorado Trail, which required some difficult elevation gain. At about noon, we had reached the top of the pass and knew we were in for some needed downhill. Our group decided to stop and make lunch before finishing up the day, seeing as we were all exhausted. As my group of about 11 or so fellow backpackers ate, we noticed two men sitting at the lower edge of the ridge. They were smoking weed, which wasn't uncommon in Colorado, but with my group comprised of mostly teenagers, we were giggling and joking about asking them for some. However, our trail guides obviously weren't going to let that happen, so we sat and watched them smoke while we snacked. Now, I don't want to seem crazy, but at this point, all the boys in my hiking group had gone exploring along the gorgeous mountain line, and the two men seemed to watch me and my 3 other girlfriends. I wasn't at all creeped out at first, but I did make eye contact at one point and could tell they were both in college or a little older. Anyways, I didn't think much of it, and once the boys came back, we started down the mountain into the valley we would be camping in. The men were pretty far ahead of us, seeing as it took a while to get our big caravan moving. After about 45 minutes of hiking, we took a break, and this is when the first of many weird occurrences happened. I was leaning against the side of the trail, looking down into the thick forest of trees when I noticed a bright orange hat, one I had seen the smoking men wearing. I squinted a little and quickly turned away when I noticed it was indeed one of the men. He was staring right at me, and I asked one of my guy friends if he saw it too, just to make sure my bad vision wasn't deceiving me. It was the weirdest thing. The man was lying down on this steep hillside, staring back at us. The weirdest part was that he didn't have his other friend with him, which I thought was very odd as the two seemed to be very close when they were up on the ridge. I was weirded out, but didn't say anything to my trail guides, seeing as I didn't want to be deemed the overly paranoid girl. We kept trekking down the hill until we reached what seemed to be an ideal camping spot. There was a nice river, plenty of room for the 4 tents we occupied, and it wasn't far off from the trail. Only downside was our neighbors, who seemed to be a somewhat large group of college boys. I thought maybe that was where the weak guys were camping, and for some reason, the large group calmed my nerves. I guess it made me realize that the guys probably weren't hermit weirdos. Fast forward a few hours later, and I headed down the trail to fill up my water. Now, normally, I would do this with a friend, but almost everyone was taking a nap, and most people didn't want to walk anymore after our nearly 16-mile day. I wanted to be nice, so I got about 4 or 5 extra canteens and decided to do a full water run. The path to the river walked right by the college campsite. I made it to the river, filled up all the water bottles, and was about to stand up from my kneeling position when I saw the orange hat again. He was on the other side of the river and was once again staring at me. This weirded me out, 'cause this took place almost 4 hours after I saw him watching our group originally, and I thought there could be no way it took him 4 hours to hike down a hill. It's only a 6-mile section of trail. Neither of us said anything, and I quickly began to walk back to my campsite and past the college boys. The man walked uncomfortably close to me, like he ran across the bridge and was within 5 feet of me. I am a 4'11" female, so immediately I wished I had taken someone else with me, but remained calm and picked up my pace. The man, unsurprisingly, turned into the college campsite. He did not seem to fit them at all, but what freaked me out the most was when I looked back, he was gesturing over to me with some sort of smirk. I tried to wave a sort of peace offer, if you will, but was weighed down by my canteens. Then one of the men, not Orange Hat, spoke. "You need some help, little miss?" he said in the creepiest tone I have ever heard. It was slow and patronizing, and made my skin crawl a little. So I replied with a meek, "No thank you," and hurried back. I felt all of their eyes staring into my back while I speed walked away. I talked to one of the guys on the trail with me and told him what happened, and he just brushed it off as me being paranoid over some college kids. Still, he told me he would walk with me by their campsite to get a good look at them, just to make me feel better. When he returned, he was wide-eyed, but wouldn't tell me what he saw or heard. This freaked me out even further, but I brushed it off as probably being some sort of locker room talk that my friend didn't feel comfortable repeating. Now, skip ahead a little while. The sun had completely set at this point, and after putting our food in bear cans, my tent mate and I walked around 100 or so meters to our tent. It's probably almost 10 at this point, and we were ready to sleep as soon as we could, but talked about the day and other typical high school girl topics. I told her about how I saw the weed dude in the orange hat at the river, and that he was part of the college campsite. She asked me if he was cute, and I told her that he seemed to be a total creep. Anyways, she kind of reassured me and joked that he probably thought I was cute or something. This made me laugh, and I fell asleep quickly, tired from the day's work. But after we had been asleep for about an hour, I woke up to what sounded like footsteps. Through the walls of our tent, I could see a flashlight coming over from where the college site was. It's important to note that our tents were arranged in a diamond disc shape, with about 30 feet between each other. We did this because the boys tended to stay up later, and this helped keep the noise down. It helped keep conversations a little more private as well. This night, my tent was the point of the triangle furthest away from everyone else, and we pushed it even further away because of the noise from the boys in the tent next to us. This is key because I knew that this light and the heavy footsteps weren't coming from anyone in our group. I instantly felt my stomach drop and looked over to see that my tent mate had noticed the noise and light too. At such a late hour, in the middle of the woods, hearing footsteps coming towards you was not a good feeling. She whispered to me, "What the heck is that noise?" And a fear shook in her voice. "I don't know, but it's freaking me out," I replied, hushing my voice even quieter. I grabbed a tent stake, lying next to me. I gripped it tightly and braced myself. The noises got louder and louder until it was clear that someone or something was standing directly in front of our tent. My heart dropped as I heard the nylon crinkle on our rain tarp. At this point, my friend and I were paralyzed with fear, gripping each other's hands fiercely. I noticed that there was 100% more than just one light, and it seemed that whoever was out there was circling our tent, flashlights in hand. I heard hushed voices, but couldn't make out anything. Still gripping my tiny metal stake as tight as I could, I thought I heard our zipper sound off when the adrenaline coursing through my body peaked. I slapped the side of the tent as hard as I could, with a rough sounding My hand came in contact with what felt like a human leg, but quickly the course of footsteps moved away from our tent. My friend and I were terrified, and watched wide-eyed as the lights grew more and more distant. Neither of us slept at all the rest of the night, whispering about whether or not we should go get our guides. Thankfully, the noises and the light didn't come back, and I fell asleep from boredom, though I was still scared out of my mind. In the morning, my stake still in hand, I went to see if I could find any footprints. To my horror, There was a mass of boot prints in the loose dirt, and they became scattered from the other direction. What scared me the most was the tree directly in front of my tents, red. Hello, marked into the wood with a knife. My heart sank, and I looked over to the other campsite. Though it was barely 7 in the morning, the college kids had moved on and left behind only a knife-carved message. Maybe they were just some boys trying to flirt or scare a couple of high school girls. But either way, the fact that they brought a knife over to our tent scares me greatly. I'm still terrified to this day about what those boys could have done if I had not slapped one of their legs, and what could have happened if we hadn't woken up and been aware of the situation. Something just tells me they weren't there with the best of intentions.
My friend and I were camping just inside a cave where the water exits the cavern. It is a large room that you can enter through a large hole in the ceiling. It slopes down at an angle, and you can walk right in. We had been coming here about once a month for 6 months or so, and camping. This night was a full moon, and clear. We had built a fire inside by our sleeping bags, and was getting ready for bed. I needed to get some more firewood, so I walked up and out of the cave. As I was standing there, I was amazed at how the woods were lit up from the full moon, and a silvery light that was cast on everything. As I stood there admiring this awesome place, I heard a very low growl right behind me. I turned around to see a very large, at least 8 foot tall, Sasquatch only 10 feet from me. The moon was behind it, so I could not see its face, but it was huge, and for a split second I was scared stiff. We stood there facing each other for a few seconds, until my shock wore off enough to think, okay, I am not a threat to you, and I'm going to walk back in the cave now. So I walked slowly to my right, the 10 steps it took to get back to the opening. I then went back to the fire, where I kept my encounter to myself and stayed awake until daybreak. When the sun was coming up, we left to go home. I couldn't help thinking that I had invaded its home, the cave. I never camped at that cave again, and only visit during the daytime. A few years later, in 2013, I camped in a tent on the same property, but a few miles from the cave, close to the house that sits on the farm. In the middle of the night, I started hearing a pack of coyotes howling in the distance. This was a little unusual to hear at that time because there was not a big coyote population in Jackson County. I went to sleep and was awakened by that same low growling I had heard years before. I knew it was the same creature I had come face to face with years earlier. As soon as it started getting light, I packed up and got out of there. Since then, my great uncle told me a story about hearing strange yells coming from the valley below his house at night. He has lived here his whole life and said he had heard every animal in the woods, but had never heard anything like this. He said it made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. The local sheriff also told a story about him chasing one across his property and tracking it for a while until the trail went cold. That same morning, his neighbor close by said she had seen it at daybreak when she went out to feed her cat. I hope these accounts help you with your research. I just wanted someone to know what is going on here in Jackson County. Keep up the good work.
I'm 21 years old and a type 1 diabetic. When I was around the age of 5 or 6, I would go to this diabetes camp for the daytime. My mom would drop me off during the day and pick me up around noon or something like that. I remember doing lots of cool activities, such as fishing, playing Twister, but one activity we would do sticks out the most: swimming. This sticks out the most because when I was going to camp around 5 or 6, there was a teen male counselor. I don't remember his name, so let's just call him Jay. Jay had a split tongue, and every time I was in my swimsuit, getting ready, Jay would look at me with such hunger in his eyes. When I would walk past him, as he would be sitting in a booth, he would always say how sexy I looked and would wink at me. Jay would also try to get me to go places with him when no one was around. Now, when I was young, I didn't go off with anyone except for those who I knew. I was a very shy, tiny kid. One day, while me and my group were swimming, my counselor told me it was time to head inside. I was having a low episode, so I told her no. I am still very feisty when I am low. Next thing I knew, I woke up in the camp infirmary. I had passed out in the pool from being low, and the lifeguard for the camp had gotten me out and did CPR. When I was walking out, I saw Jay, and he asked me if she did mouth-to-mouth with me, and that it was hot if the lifeguard did. When my mom got me that day, I told her I didn't want to go back to that camp because I felt homesick. Yes, I lied, but I felt that it was better if I told her that than if I told her the truth, honestly. She wouldn't have believed me anyway, I don't think. Flash forward to 2019, and I told her everything, and she apologized to me for those things happening, and asked why I did not tell her. I told her I was afraid of no one believing me. I don't know if this man remembers what he did to me, but I hope he hasn't trapped any other children. And I know this probably wasn't the scariest or most uncomfortable story you've ever read, Mr. Swamp Dweller, but thank you for sharing it anyway.
This was about 11 years ago when I lived in southern Montana. We have coyotes and an occasional mountain lion sighting, but no bears. My house was just a bit outside of town, and the neighborhood made a large circle. We had seen mountain lions on the cliffs behind our house, and coyotes a couple of streets further back before. It was late summer or early fall, around 2 or 3 a.m., when I decided to go for a walk, as I did often. Now there was this spot on my walk that was a large open lot that was a hill on a curved part of the road so you couldn't see around it. On the other side of this area was a drained irrigation ditch. Now, this lot always gave me the creeps, and it wasn't just me. Everyone I talked to didn't like this area. I had just gotten to this area when the asphalt turned to gravel and my flashlight went out. I heard a truck come barreling around the corner, and the person driving slammed on the brakes right in front of me. I thought it was a little weird since I was on the side of the road, but then I realized he wasn't looking at me. I turned to look towards the irrigation ditch, and that's when I saw them. 3 large masses moved out from behind a tree. They had the ears and muzzle of a dog or wolf. Their bodies were muscular, but they were hunched and moved in a really odd fashion. They'd extend one claw forward and then do like a hop, drag motion for the rest of their body to catch up. They all disappeared into the ditch. I looked back at the truck, and the guy stepped on the gas, kicking up rocks behind him as he sped off. I was left in the dark for a few moments, stunned, and then my flashlight flickered back on. It would have been faster for me to go home past the empty lot and irrigation ditch, but I sprinted the other way. A house from mine, there was an alleyway that went back to some caves, with large lilac bushes lining the alley. As I was running by the alley, I heard rustling. I got to my house and went to fling open the sliding glass door when I heard a low growl from behind. I ran inside, shut the door, and shined the light into the bushes that the growl had come from. My light caught a reflection of eyes before it disappeared. I went back the next day. Based on the tree they had come out from behind, they were about 4 feet tall, hunched. Where I saw the eyes would have been about 7 feet. I didn't go walking at night after that.
I just wanted to put it out all on the table. I am not very good at telling stories, so this is going to be my best to give you guys some insight on a collection of stories I have from my time working at this summer camp. I'll start out by giving you some background on where all of this takes place. These stories are a bit lengthy, so I do apologize in advance. I'll try to stay brief, but the premise of all this is quite important, so I might as well get the tedious details out of the way. I worked and lived near a summer camp in northeastern United States that runs from late July to early August every summer. The main attraction of the camp is that it is an overnight camp. Staff and campers arrive on Sunday afternoon and leave Friday evening each week during the camp season. While living isolated in the camp during the week, the camp has many cabins used for sleeping, a huge mess hall for meals, and about 10 other buildings ranging from quite large, single-story centers to small supply sheds. The entire camp property stretches for acres and acres and is incredibly beautiful in that lush, cool forest greenway that the Northeast has in the summer. There's everything from big, open fields and forests to a large pond full of fish and a long stretch of beautiful ravine with lots of exposed shale and wildlife. It is set a good distance off any main roads, and you have to travel up a long way before you can even get into the camp. The entire property feels like its own isolated universe. Campers are not allowed to have electronics. Staff can in the evenings and on break. No computers, no cars, and little communication with the outside world apart from what is required. When needed, staff carry walkie-talkies to keep in touch across the expanse of the camp. I went there as a child for 10 years and worked there for around 4 years, and it's safe to say I have a whole lot of love for that place. But to anyone who has worked there, you would know that the place has a long and very complex history with the paranormal. I could write a full-length book with all the stories I have heard and have personally experienced there over the many summers. I'd like to give a good overview of what the place is like as a staff member and share a couple of the more chilling encounters I've had. Many still give me the shivers to this day, even though I have been somewhat desensitized to them for a while now. Most of these encounters I'm going to share with you happened sometime between the years of 2014 and 2018, while I was training and working as a counselor. I was between 16 and 20 at the time. Most of the activity would happen at night during the training week and just generally around staff of the camp. Rarely did the campers ever come in contact with the entities that lurk within the woods there. Why that is, I honestly couldn't tell you. My memories there as a child do not contain even a trace of fright or things I couldn't explain. In contrast to that, the experiences I had there as a young adult had me nearly in tears. Consistently, there would be things that would happen each year without fail. To start, during the training week or after the kids had gone to bed, many of us counselors would lay out under the stars outside the mess hall to unwind from the day. It had a beautiful, clear view of the constellations out over the rec field and onto the hills beyond. Many nights, we would see quick, blinking lights moving in erratic patterns, odd meteor showers when there was none predicted in the area, and often see strange red flickering objects deep out in the sky. And no, these were not planets, as they would often be in the wrong place in the sky and only stick around one evening out of the week. I had a few good friends who were very understanding of our solar system. I spent many nights looking at their utterly baffled faces as they looked up at some oddity that had appeared, exclaiming that what they were seeing was just simply impossible, despite 10+ witnesses seeing it happening. Counselors often cannot go an entire summer without experiencing nightmares, many of which include figures standing in the corners of their cabins or at the foot of their bunks. I had these nightmares every year except my first year working there. I would wake in a cold sweat to a quiet cabin, and the kids resting peacefully nearby. Screams and voices in the night carried into the camp off the wind from the pond. Footsteps pacing around buildings only for there to be no one there, and items disappearing and reappearing in illogical places was all incredibly common. Doors with heavy padlocks would be found open with no one to blame. Occasionally, a counselor would get locked into a building they were working in, despite no one being around to lock the door. People would walk into this job being complete skeptics and leave solid believers. Returning staff had to make peace with the things within the camp and just deal with it, and give fair warning to newcomers about the mysteries that seemed to live in the very floorboards of that camp. My first memory of there being anything paranormal within the camp was in 2014. While I was training for my first year as a camp counselor, I remember that throughout my childhood, there had been a singular, flat tombstone that lay on the hill leading down to the camp's pool. It sat right outside the girls' village, the term used for all the cabins where the female campers and counselors slept. It was incredibly old, so old that the name and dates were unreadable, but the way the text was formatted made it obvious that it was someone's grave. No one could really give an explanation as to who or why it was there. Everyone I asked about it simply told me it had been there long before them. My first year there, I remember there being lots of drama concerning the paranormal, but I was too young and not close enough with the older counselors for any of them to share what was going on with me. But by the end of the year, the tombstone had been removed and no one was allowed to talk about it or mention of it. I remember thinking to myself that even though the tombstone was gone, someone was probably still buried on that hill, no matter how long ago they had been laid to rest. Maybe the camp directors thought by getting rid of it they would bring the end to the paranormal activity. Unfortunately, they were wrong. Alongside the mysterious tombstone, many stories rotated through my co-counselor's friends, and I as the newest staff member. The first stories I was ever told about the camp happened during a training weekend in June of 2014. My friends and I had gotten on the topic of scary stories, and the older counselors jumped in to have a little fun with us. An older counselor named Gadget was the first to pipe up, telling us about the two famous ghosts of the camp. He told us about the ghost of a boy who had been seen running through the rec field in the streetlights from the dead-end road that ran along the edge of the camp. Gadget told us he had been hit by a car after running after the ball, and now spent his life running through the shadows of the camp, scaring anyone awake to see him. The second story was that of the woman in white. Under the same streetlights that lit the dead-end road that bordered the camp, a few small houses sat. On some nights, a woman wearing a long, flowing white dress could be seen standing on one of the deck porches. She would spend the night standing and staring up at the camp, and then would be gone by sunrise. My fellow first-year counselors and I were of course quite scared at this point. It was far past midnight, and we were gathered under the floodlights of a brightly lit pavilion near the rec field and dead-end road. They had us scared by the end of the storytelling. Luckily, another one of the older counselors, someone who had come to be one of my dearest friends during my time there, called Slag, simply shook his head and furrowed his brows as he watched the older counselors spook us. Later that evening, Slag took me up to the top of the hill that overlooked the rec field and the dead-end road. He could tell how scared I was at the rumors, but from our vantage point he explained and showed me that Gadget and his friends had been talking about. Down on the rec field, the streetlights caused long, slanting shadows to fall in a sickly yellow onto the grass. On one of the light poles, there was an electrical box, and the way the shadow fell into the grass made the perfect shape of a small child, caught mid-step. When I saw it, it made me jump at how realistic it looked. It was no wonder it became popular, as it truly could be mistaken for an actual apparition. Slag also pointed out, to me, the woman in white. Again, I didn't see her at first, but Slag's description helped. The woman in white was simply an oversized American flag that hung in one of the house porches. That evening was clear and breezy. The moonlight caused the flag to look milky white, and the wind made it dance slowly around the flagpole just as the dress of an actual woman would float in the breeze. I started to laugh in relief, but Slag's face stayed serious. He went on to explain to me that even though these were merely scary coincidences, we were not alone here. He explained to me some of what I have shared with you, and it made me turn serious as well. That night, my friend and I huddled into the same small bunk out of this newborn fear. We didn't realize it was the beginning of a long road of stories of our own. One of the places in the camp that granted me the most unnerving experiences was a building we referred to as day camp. We had a program where we would bus in the youngest age group of campers, and they would have their own day of camp activities before returning home at around 4 p.m. The building was the only two-story building on the property, and used to be a house before the camp was built in 1925. The main space had big, beautiful windows that let in the sunset. The kitchen worked, but was little run down. The upstairs was a large attic-like room that served as a space to use for activities on the days it rained. Day camp was easily the farthest building from all the others. You had to walk through a stretch of woods on a small, rocky trail to get there, and oftentimes you couldn't even hear the sounds of the other people from the building, and that's saying a lot, as there are easily 300 loud, hyper kids and preteens there each week. Day camp never felt right to me. The feeling of the building gave me the Blair Witch Project vibes, something I didn't feel many other places in the camp. I tried to never go there alone, though I did need to close the building by myself. My body would tense up, and I felt as if something physically pressed down on my skin any time I would walk through there. Every time I turned my back to an empty room, I felt as like an entire crowd of silent, watchful people stared through me. The boys' village was the nearest cluster of buildings to the day camp. Unless day camp was being used in the evening by someone and the lights were on, it was nearly impossible to see the building with a blind eye. The dark brown wood blended into the expanse of woods that hid it from the rest of the camp. Day camp always got closed down around 4 p.m. after the day campers returned home. All the rooms were checked, lights turned off, padlocked back in place, and locked until the next morning. My male counselor friend shared with me that every summer, once or twice a week, once the kids had gone to bed and the boys sat outside talking, someone would notice a light on in the day camp, and this wasn't simply one leaving the light on from the day. Sometimes the same counselor who had closed the day camp earlier that would see the lights on in the downstairs glowing in solidarity through the dark woods. On these nights, the boys would take turns walking down the dark path there and back to get the light, returning shivering and swearing they never do that again. My personal experience with day camp came during the summer of 2016. Every summer the camp performs something called a missing camper drill. This simply prepares counselors for the event that a scared child would run away, staff and react quickly to locate them and calm them. The drill on a good day is already something that is taken incredibly seriously by all staff. The missing camper is a randomly chosen counselor each training week, and all the counselors have to go through the procedure of tracking down the child. To do this, camp is split into sections, and the eldest staff take walkie-talkies and divide up the areas, and sprint around the camp, looking for the missing camper, shouting their name, looking under and around structures in the camp, and checking any locked buildings. The camp director will go around before the drill and do things to throw off searching counselors too. They'll unlock doors, lock others, move things around, just to get everyone in the mindset of an actual drill. Of course, the area I was given to search, alone may I add, was day camp. As I ran through the woods and towards the looming house, I felt a huge sense of dread fall over me, and I seriously considered not searching it at all, and just telling the other staff that I did. With shaking hands, I unlocked the day camp door and walked around inside, calling the name of the girl who was acting as the missing child. The floorboards creaked, and I remember how incredibly silent the whole house felt, apart from my movements. The sun was setting at the time, and creamy orange light fell through the length of the building from the windows. It was so unnatural compared to the busier parts of the camp. I couldn't hear the other counselors, not even when I strained my ears. Every room and corner I checked, I braced myself to come face to face with the spirits I saw in the nightmares. The ones I heard crunching over gravel in the middle of the night. The ones who speak softly in the dark and make even grown men run back into their bunks, unnerved. The building was clear. I sighed in relief as I locked the door firmly behind me and headed back outside. The air had begun to get chilly, and I hoped the drill would be over soon. Searching in the dark would be near impossible, and I knew that Swift, my friend who was acting as the missing kid, had no desire to creep around the camp in the dark. As I walked past the external cellar doors that led under the day camp, I gave them a good shake to check the padlock on them. Locked. This was a location I was previously told I do not need to open or check for this drill. I went on and searched the woods surrounding the building and found nothing and reported it on my walkie. I was told to keep double checking the area until Swift was found and the drill ended. I started walking back, slower this time as I was fairly positive Swift was at least half a mile on the other side of the camp. As day camp came into sight through the trees, I froze in confusion and fear. The cellar doors of the camp cellar were both flung open, and a yellowish light shone from inside. It was just becoming dark enough that the light spilled out and illuminated the space around it, while the shadows of its surroundings only pushed in darker. Never in my previous 3 years of working at the camp did I even know those doors could even open at this point. Never did I know that there was even a key for that padlock, nor did I know there was a working light down there. I was completely stunned. Shivers ran through me, and certainly not from the evening chill. "Swift?" I called. Not in the way I would call to a camper, but as I would call to her normally. Nothing moved. Nothing made a noise. The fear felt cold and numbing in my veins. I crept to the top of the cellar stairs and peered down. The space was lit by a single exposed light bulb, showing me 6 or 7 rotting wooden steps and cold-looking stone walls, all broken with age. The floor was dirt, and there was no objects inside the cellar. The sound of my radio going off, that Swift had been found, nearly made me jump out of my skin. I fell backwards onto my butt in the grass and spent another second staring at the bizarre scene in front of me. I scrambled up and back towards the rest of the camp as quickly as possible. To my surprise, I arrived back. My friend Amino also appeared visibly shaken and was talking quickly. She was telling us that during the drill she was walking by one of the maintenance sheds on camp, another location with a padlocked door that we weren't including in the drill. To her surprise, the door started shaking violently against its padlock, much more than any wind or draft could do. Fully believing that Swift was trapped in there as part of the scenario, quickly found my other friend Handles and got the key to open the shed. As I swung it open, they found no one. In fact, the maintenance man Sparrow hadn't even been to the camp that day, so there was no way anything or anyone could have opened that before he got there. She was so shaken up, she could barely get her story out. I also told everyone what I encountered. Everyone looked at us jarred by our stories, but none were all that surprised, honestly. I realize how long this collection of stories has gone on, and in truth, this honestly isn't even half of what I've seen or heard about from people. But I'll leave it here for now. Maybe I'll share more stories in the future if you guys enjoy them. Even though I've made peace with my experiences at this camp, and I'm even applying to work there again this summer, I've always felt that camps like this have their fair share of stories. If there's anyone around who has had something similar happen to them at another summer camp, I'd love to hear about it. Thank you for sharing my story. Thanks for listening to these creepy and downright strange camping stories sent in by viewers just like you. Honestly, that last story is going to keep me away from any summer camps anytime soon. All those Jason movies kept me away from summer camps as a kid. How about you guys? Did you guys ever go to summer camps? I'd love to know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed these stories, please hit that like button, as it helps me out a ton. If you're new to the swamp, why not join us? Hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications to never miss a new video. I upload them almost every single day, and all things natural and supernatural. If you enjoyed my friend Being Scared's voice, please be sure to check out his channel. The link to do so will be at the top of the description. He's a good guy and posts a lot of great stories that I know you guys will like. If you guys aren't aware, you can download your favorite scary stories from the swamp on iTunes, Spotify, Podbean, Stitcher Radio, and more. I'll see you guys soon with another creepy video. Today's code word, if you made it all the way to the end, is horrible bat. Be sure to comment that and let me know that you made it to the end, and to confuse anybody else who didn't. I'll see you guys soon. Tally ho.